We'll start with the timer trigger and see how all of these components work together in case of a timer trigger. What you're seeing on screen is a timer triggered function. It's a very simple function. The name of the function is called run cleanup job, and it's decorated with the function attribute. That's how we declare that particular method is an Azure function, and the runtime recognizes that this is an Azure function to create the context and create the runtime for this. So we decorate the method with the function attribute and the name along with the function attribute. And in the method, you see that there's a timer trigger. So we have used a timer trigger. So this function is triggered by a timer and not by any other. And this is the function execution context or the function context. So this is established by the Azure runtime, this context, whenever the timer triggers. This is the cron expression or the syntax that we need to specify as to how frequently we need to execute this function. Based on the cron expression, we can schedule any function to run on a minute by minute basis or a second by second basis or an hourly basis or a daily basis or maybe weekly or even monthly basis. So there's a specific syntax we may need to be aware of to schedule the trigger of the function of the timer trigger. And then this is nothing but accessing the context objects and writing the log information and all that stuff. Use monitor is an attribute that we specify to a timer trigger, which is basically signaling the runtime to keep information about the state of the timer trigger. Meaning whenever the timer trigger triggers, the runtime keeps state that, okay, this timer trigger is triggered at this point in time, the function executed with or without errors. And in case we set this to true, which in this case it is, it's a signal to the Azure runtime saying that it needs to maintain the state. And if there are any missed triggers, or if a trigger did not trigger or the function did not execute at a particular point in time, the runtime will check the status of it, and then it will make sure or ensure that even the missed triggers or the missed executions are executed. So this state information that we have enabled over here goes and sits in the Azure storage account of the function app. So that's what this particular attribute says for this timer trigger. And then run on startup is another parameter or property that we can set on this timer trigger, which indicates that whenever we kind of start an Azure function, when we deploy it, or even when we are running it locally, whenever we start this Azure function, the timer triggered Azure function, run on startup, when it's enabled, it ensures that as soon as the function is triggered and it's executing, the logic will run for the first time, irrespective of what schedule we have set in this particular cron expression. So that's what this run on startup does if it's enabled. So now if you want to visualize it,